Oh my God. One of the hardest things I've done in my life. I thought I was entering this 10-day of complete Zen. And to be completely honest, it was a nightmare. It was like a boot camp for your mind. I was reporting to the CEO of that company, leading innovation and R&D within the company at a global level, global scale. Your time schedule is completely messed up. So I was basically stressed out and overweight, and coming out of 10 days on meditation retreat. That's what I got, this idea of building a wearable that tracks your mind. Our brain is so good at self-adjusting to the point that it doesn't realize when we are actually stressed. So this is the tool to anchor our mind, to bring that awareness.
So you released the alpha. What are the next steps for your company, for the product? What's coming up?
Our long-term vision is really continuously monitoring the brain health throughout your life. Hopefully someday we'll be able to
Hey, Antonio, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Dar?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I always like to start the episode with kind of connecting the dots for our audience. So if you could take us back either to your childhood or teenage years, just to give us an idea of what kind of things you were interested in during that part of your life.
Yeah, so since I was a little kid, I was always interested in building. And literally, started my experience as a builder just by helping my grandfather actually building actual homes. Like he was an architect and a builder, and he could do everything from bottom up. And so I was very fascinated by this idea of building things from scratch. And I was spending my summers helping him out. And so he really inspires me to become an engineer. Although I become a very different type of engineers. Instead of building homes, I start building actually hardware and software, hardware devices and software. But nevertheless, I think he plants the seed since early stage of my life, And then, so that's how it all started.
Okay. So you could build a house now, right? If you wanted to.
I still do some work in my mom's house. When I go back to Italy, I help her. She's very hands-on. And so I help her with little tiny works around the house, the garden and stuff. But I'm still very handy.
What a great skill to gain so early on. So that makes sense that you went on to doing something much more hands-on. As you kind of went into your studies, did you explore anything, or did you know right away you wanted to go into, hardware and, go that route?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do engineering school. I didn't quite know what to do, what type of engineering. And back then was when 2G and 3G were really taking off. So this dates me back to those times. And it was like the revolution of cellular. And so I said, definitely, I want to do something in telecommunications. And it was a really hot back then. So I went to engineering school in Torino, in northern Italy. It's one of the best engineering school in Italy. And that's how I started. And the more I studied telecommunications, the more I became passionate about it. And 20 years later, I spent 20 years, the first 20 years of my career in telecom, pretty much.
Okay, great. And I noticed you went and also got your master's and PhD. Did you do that like right after your bachelor's, or did you work for a little bit and then decide to go back? What was that journey like?
Yeah, so when I did my college in Italy, was a combined program of bachelor and master. Now they split it like in the US. But when I was doing it, I had no choice. Either you do a master or not. So I did my master, and then I went to study in France. And then through my school in France, I did 1 year in a really beautiful place, French Riviera. Sophia Antipolis is like the technology hub of France, like a little tiny Silicon Valley in Europe. And from there, I got selected to an internship in a startup here in California. And I said, wow, that's my dream. I always wanted to come to the US. I knew that Silicon Valley was the place to be if you're in tech. And so I got this internship. It was a 6 months, and then I fell in love with California, with the tech scene here, with everything. It's an incredible place to be if you're in tech, especially. So then I decided to stay, and then I worked for a couple of years in the Valley, and then I decided to go back to study and do a PhD in electrical engineering at UT Austin. Yeah.
Yeah, great. What was important about getting your PhD? Because I assume, or at least I've seen, a lot of engineers don't go all the way to their PhD. So what were you looking to learn and gain from that experience?
So, the startup, one of the startup that I worked during those 2 years here, it was a company, an incredible company, a startup founded by Marty Cooper. He's the inventor of the Cellphone back in Motorola 50 years ago now. And he inevitably attracted the top talents from Stanford's, the top major university. So it was a massive amount of PhDs in that company. And I just graduated with my master, and I just was inspired by all these brilliant minds. I saw the depth that they could, their depth in a building product, the attention for details, the ability to stick to a problem, the resilience, the determination, that it's all qualities that they got emphasized during my PhD, because it requires lots of commitment, lots of determination, but also really helps you go very deep down into a very specific narrow problem, but go really deep. So I think I got inspired by that company that I worked at.
Okay. What was your takeaway from your PhD? I hear it's a very rigorous program and pretty long. So what do you feel like you walked away with at the end?
I would say a lot of resilience. I had an incredible PhD advisor who was he's still one of the top researchers in wireless, specifically a technology called MIMO. It's one of the most popular technology used in any cellular phone, any Wi-Fi system has this technology. It was one of the pioneers of this technology. So brilliant person, Dr. Robert Heath, and just an incredible advisor. So it was a team that we had to work really hard. And so I guess things were, like in any PhD programs, there's a lot of ups and downs. It's just like a startup. I think the main takeaway is the resilience, the ability to stick to it, stick to the vision of my advisor, and stick to just get it through. Like there were so many moments where I just wanted to give up. Like, I don't know how many papers published, but I think it was like 20 plus papers in just 3 years of my PhD. So we work really hard.
Wow.
And it's like, when I say those numbers to people, I say, what? You published 20 papers? So yeah, I mean, it was a lot of sacrifices, a lot of late nights, but it paid off. The things I learned during those years, unbelievable. The depth in solving problems, it was worth it. So if I had to summarize in one word, it's really resilience and determination.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. 20 papers in 3 years. That just sounds like you were probably working nonstop.
Yeah.
So you're wrapping up your PhD. What are you looking forward to doing next?
So after my PhD, I started working actually the last couple of months of my PhD with a serial entrepreneur here in Silicon Valley. He came up with this idea of, doing the same technology just in a different way, a different type of implementation of what's called MIMO technology, like I mentioned before. And I pitched this idea. I said, this is great. And so I started building with him. Our research center was one of the top in the country for this specific technology. And so me and my advisor started working together on this project. And then coming out, when I graduated, I decided to join this team as a co-founder and just starting this new company. This is my first company, really.
What was that experience like? Because that was your first company. What are some things like you didn't know at the time that you eventually learned?
Well, a lot of things. The first startup is always a lot of learning. Luckily, I was blessed to have a business partner who was phenomenal, serial entrepreneur, Steve Perman. And so I learned a lot from him. And again, I learned a lot of resilience, but also how to build products, and how to transform a technology into a product. And yeah, I think that's the main lesson from my first startup.
Is there any failures that you remember that still kind of stay with you and teach you a lesson from that first company?
Well, there's like in any startup, there's many failures, constant learning lessons. I would say my new startup right now, what I really learn is the attention to customers. So you can have the greatest technology, the greatest product, and you also need to really, I come from a very deep technology background. So one of the things that I learned in this new company, one of the greatest lessons, which was actually coming out of Techstars. Techstars, they are really, serious about customers and interviewing customers, understanding your customer, understanding their pain point, and then build a product around that. So I think the biggest learning for me more recently was really the attention to customers and make sure, and that's a constant, it's a continuous iteration. Like even right now that we just released our alpha and we are onboarding users. So we interview a lot of them in the last couple of years, but now we are also start interviewing those ones that are using our device to understand what they like, what they don't like, and keep improving. So that's critical for the success of a company.
Yeah, it's one of the things I do talk to founders about a lot is, are you speaking to your customers? Like, are you interviewing them? Are you seeing how they use your product? What's working, what's not working? What is their feedback, right? At least some amount of like data and metrics from that to help push the growth of the product, or at least iteration of the product, right? Because if you're just guessing, it's a little difficult to know what will work or not work. But if you have direct feedback, I mean, at least these segment of people will like this next iteration, right? So yeah, it's a very critical piece that I think maybe first-time founders don't always pay attention to. So that's great that you're applying that to your current company.
Definitely. Yeah. It's really the realization. It's not about me or my technology. It's about customers being happy and build something that is useful for customers who address the real pain factor. And the more you interview, the more you spend time with them, the more you understand their pain factors, and it's things that stays in your DNA at that point. When you have customers, that's why it's so useful to, as a founder, do the interviews yourself. One of my mentors is the founder and CEO of a really successful company, and I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago. He was saying, I still do my own interviews, and it's so good because you really, at any stage of the company, going back to that ABC of learning your customers, like it's really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, I imagine even as your company scales, the more connected you are to your customer, the better your vision can be for your company, right? Or else you could kind of create something from the top and not fully understand what's happening with your customers, and there's misalignment there, right? So I can see why he would spend time doing that, and that's amazing. I think probably most leaders need to do that. So you're wrapping up your first company. Where are you going to next to get back on our timeline?
Went back to corporate. So I was head of R&D at Rakuten Symphony. It's a Japanese company, the Amazon of Japan. For people that don't know Rakuten, it's a big company. Just like Amazon, has a lot of different verticals, and one of these was about cellular networks. So I was reporting to the CEO of that company, and just leading innovation and R&D within the company at a global scale. So it was, I would say, probably my first exposure to a global team. So very different type of work. It's still the same. Like it was like the underlying technology was very similar to what I developed in my previous startup, which is the software-defined cellular networks, cloud-native cellular networks, where you simplify the hardware at the cell site and put most of the processing in the cloud. It's a relatively new technology now. Every operator in the world is gradually implementing, so gradually transitioning from hardware-based appliances to something that's more cloud-native and network-based. So it's very similar technology, but very different type of work in a bigger company.
I'm sure that's a big transition going from like a startup to a global like corporation, and you're leading global teams. What was that transition like for you, and how did you adapt your leadership to this new environment? Were there some lessons there for you?
Yeah, so in a big company, it becomes a lot of people skills. Like in startups, you need to have as a founder people skills, but you also need to do a lot of hands-on work. I would say in a big company, a big corporation, especially at that level, it was a lot of people skills. So I was basically working across 5 different business units And to get things done, I had to basically talk to the president of each of these 5 business units. So mine was a more like an horizontal type of work across the different business units. And I think what I really learned is the ability to connect to people, especially when you have very few face-to-face meetings, because everybody is remote and people are across the world in different parts of the world. Also learn that face-to-face is always preferred. So lots of trips to Japan, India, Europe. But yeah, I think it was mainly soft skill, of course, applied to technology. Understanding the technology was a key, because that's the language you use with the different business units. I think it was more a lot of soft skills and, putting people together to accomplish a given mission. People that are already busy and focus on their own business unit and still work together collaboratively in a way that you get your goals accomplished.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of cross-functional coordination and alignment, right? And that usually takes up more time, I think, than anything else to get actual work done.
It's much more variance, let's say, when you deal with people and when you deal with technology. So much more unpredictability, much more moving parts. So you need to gain a lot of people skills, patience, determination. That's a given. So yeah.
No, that's great. I like the contrast in your experience of like the startup and like this global corporation. As you also mentioned, you traveled a lot, which just adds another layer to the whole thing. And so once you wrap that up, what was next for you after that?
So I've been thinking about this idea of health and well-being, especially when you travel so much. And you travel and you work across time zones. You're in the US, but now you're working with Japan, you're working with India, you're working with Europe. So your time schedule is completely messed up. It is not as a founder, it's messed up for different reasons. So one of the things that I realize is that, and it is a common thing that many also executives have, especially when you travel so much, you forget about the basics, which is your health, your physical health and your mental health. Right. And that's what I realized, that wearables are incredible tool to keep me on track. You can be the most mindful person, the more self-aware person, but when you are, working nonstop, when you have crazy schedule, when you start traveling a lot, you kind of lose control of your own well-being. And so what I think wearables do, the cool thing about wearables is they keep you really anchored. Like when you see your biometrics on a phone or on the watch itself, right? You really see, and especially if you're a numbers person like me, like I love to look at KPIs, graphs. And so seeing the graphs of not of the company, but of your own health on a phone, it's fascinating, and if you like to track stuff, it really helps you be accountable for your own health. So I was basically stressed out and overweight, and I realized enough was enough. So I decided, okay, we gotta do something about it. I got myself a smart scale and an Apple Watch. Start tracking my calorie burn and start measuring my weight every day. Start adjusting my nutrition. Start cooking by myself. Start putting my grandmother's and mom's recipes in action. And, exercising almost every day, having a target of calorie burn and tracking them especially. And so I lost 40 pounds in 12 months. So that was the result of that.
Amazing.
Well, yeah. And that's myself. Like, what if I want to lose 40 pounds of stress? How would I even measure it? So I was still stressed out. And so that's how I came up with this idea of Aware. Actually coming out of 10 days silent meditation retreat. That's why I got this idea of building a wearable that tracks your mind.
Wow. There's so much I want to talk about there. One, I can relate to the travel. I was a consultant prior to this and I traveled every week. So it's so easy to like get off schedule and just not take care of yourself. So I can definitely relate to that story. And also like working in so many different time zones, you're like on calls with people at like weird times, which is also kind of like, looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. I remember being on a call at like 3 a.m. at one point, like just weird stuff. So it can really impact literally every part of your life, right? Like to sleep, nutrition, and fitness, like you mentioned. So that's incredible that you were able to like reflect on that and just like take action. Cause I think sometimes that's the hardest part for most people is just getting kind of serious. And I love like looking at my graphs too, like of my health, because I have an Aura ring. So, like just tracking everything daily, like how did I sleep? How much am I moving? And then, being able to like look at trends and go, oh my God, okay, I need to make some changes and adjust. I think it really does help to like stay accountable because, you don't have to guess. Like you have all the information in front of you where as before, you can kind of like get away with like not taking action. So I think that's great. And I think stress, more or less, like it was kind of like a vague, I don't know, like a subjective kind of thing, right? Like maybe you're stressed, maybe you're not. Like sometimes you feel it, sometimes it's like more underlying. So you don't really have like concrete data, right, to take action on it, to say, okay, I've been kind of in a chronic stress phase and I need to do something about it. So coming out of your retreat, or I guess, let me ask you, the 10-day retreat, what motivated you to go on a 10-day retreat?
But I've been meditating for about 7 years, pretty regularly. I, discovered the power of meditation, and it's now neuroscience, finally even proved that there's a scientific proof that meditation actually does help us being healthier, especially mentally healthier. So it's an incredible intervention. It's very slow. You need to be very consistent and just be very consistent in practicing. It's just like going to the gym. You build your muscles. You stop going to the gym, you don't build muscles anymore, right? So it's the same concept, right? But if you are consistent, it becomes a habit. And you get to a point, when they say some people, they are so into going to the gym or exercise, and they say, like, I cannot see myself without going to the gym. It's almost like food for them. And the same thing is meditation. Like the more you practice, you get to a point, like there's no way I go to sleep at night without at least 20 minutes of meditation. Like, it's just my body demanding it. At the beginning, it was like a lot of friction, but then and once it becomes an habit, then it becomes much, much easier. But what inspired me is a friend of mine. She did his 10 days Vipassana retreat, and she told me about it. And she told me, Antonio, this is really challenging. Be aware of it, but I think it will be so good for you, especially because you have some background in meditation. So I signed up. And I got admitted to that center, and that's how I did it.
Nice. No, I think all the points you made are so spot on, especially with like the recent studies that show how important meditation is for your mental health. And I think what I learned, because this is a reminder for me to like get back into my practice. But when I was doing it consistently, it was much easier to kind of be more in tune with my thoughts and feelings. Whereas I think now, having been out of practice, I notice I'm not as in tune. Like sometimes I have to like really slow down to feel it and like be aware of my thoughts compared to like when I am in the practice, right? So I think that's one of the things that you really just kind of tap into much more naturally.
The nice thing you just said it, like just to give some self-compassion also, like even just the awareness that you're not in tune, it's a own self-awareness, right? And I do the same thing. But for example, when I travel, I have really hard time keep up with my meditation practice. I don't know why. When I go to Italy to see my family, I completely slack off on that habit. But just the awareness of seeing that, what that does to your body on its own is self-awareness, which is kind of cool. Like years ago, I didn't even have that, right?
Right.
So
that is so true. That is so true. But like I wasn't aware until like I talked to you about it. So I feel like I need to just maybe have some sessions with you every once in a while to be reminded. But yeah, that does put it on my to-do list to kind of make these changes. But I have not been to like a meditation retreat. What was it like to do that for like 10 days? Because like, are your cell phones put away? Are
Oh my
you
gosh, it was one of the hardest thing I've done in my life. Literally,
really?
maybe along with my PhD in my company. And it was funny because I thought I was entering this 10-day or complete Zen. Coming in the meditation retreat, I was in this beautiful place in the middle of nowhere, up north of here, north of San Francisco, and literally in the middle of nowhere, and it's in the woods, away from everything. And I thought it's gonna be the 10 most zen days of my life. To be completely honest, it was a nightmare. It was like a boot camp for your mind. Like, imagine like those physical boot camp, like Barry's boot camp or stuff like that. And it's like the same thing, but for your mind, because you leave your wallet, you leave your cell phone, you leave everything at the front door, and they keep it for you for 10 days. You walk inside your room, you have a room just for yourself. Some retreat, they actually shared rooms. My case, it was just by myself. And basically, you cannot talk, you cannot make eye contact, you cannot write, you cannot read, you cannot do yoga, you cannot do
Wow.
physical exercise. You can't do anything. It's literally, you cannot make eye contact. And there's 20 females and 20 males separate. You just meet in a meditation room. But for the most part, it's like waking up at 4 a.m. until 9 p.m. is basically 1 or 2 hours of solo meditation in your room and 1 or 2 hours of group meditation in the meditation hall. That's it. Then you take 3 breaks, 1 for breakfast, 1 for lunch, and 1 for dinner. And that's pretty much it. Everything is completely vegetarian and very basic food. Even when you eat in front of a wall. So,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, just when you describe to people, it's like, why would you do that? But it was the most powerful, one of the most powerful experiences of my life. Coming out of it, like the entire retreat is like a torture in a way. Like, I wanted to leave it's funny how your mind acts, your mind is restless, but of course it slows down, and you just don't realize because you don't have a reference. You don't have anything, right? So during those 10 days, and so you lose contact, you lose that reference. And then when you walk out of the gate, now you see the difference. Like, you see much clearer. It's after the retreat that you really see the difference. Throughout the retreat, it's a nightmare. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's very subjective. For some people, it's not. For me, it was.
No, I've heard this from so many people that it is absolutely like terrible the whole time you're there. And then it's not till like you leave and you notice a difference as you kind of re-enter your day-to-day life and you go, oh my God, that was amazing. I guess it is similar to like a workout, like you said, like when you're doing it, you probably hate it, right? But as you kind of stop and you're done, you're like, oh my God, I feel amazing.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't have reference for 10 days, right? And so your mind keeps spinning. There's no way you're gonna stop your mind, but it just spins so much slower, and you don't not having the reference, you don't realize until you get out of it. And then you see, wow, and now you have the comparison with the rest of the world. You feel you regain your life back. Like, you feel like you have so much more time during the day, because a lot of the time we spend is spinning our mind, right? But if that slows down, now you can get so much more done. You're so much more productive. It feels like a day lasts like 48 hours now, right? So I think that's why you see things after the retreat.
Do you still feel like those effects are still with you? Or do you need another boot camp?
Yeah. So what I've been doing ever since, I've been doing is like, I take a week off during Christmas, and I do my own meditation retreat. It's less strict than that. So I allow myself to read books. I allow myself to do exercise. I just don't talk to people for a week, and I typically pick a place that I really like and just go and spend time by myself and just recharge. But I try to do every day, like I said, even just 20 minutes, even showing that just 5 minutes meditation a day can do miracles in your life. Just 5 minutes. So that habit of doing meditation and feeling the urge to meditate more than being a chore. Oh, I need to meditate today. That stayed And as well as when I'm stressed right now, I became so much better at managing my stress, which for a founder, it's so critical. Of course, helps also the fact that I'm building a product in mental health. Yet it's forcing me, as I tested, it's forcing me to breathe. Or not forcing me, it's suggesting, but it's kind of encouraging me to do that. So that really helps. I think it's also the fact that, whenever I feel stressed, so whenever I feel that the pressure builds up, my mind by default goes back into that tiny room where I spent 10 days of my life. There was black and white. There was nothing, no furniture. It was really like a prison cell, right? And my mind somehow goes back to that room and calms down. It really taught me how my mind functions.
Yeah.
What are the dynamics that are happening within my mind?
Yeah. No, I've heard so many similar things from people who've done these retreats. Maybe one day that will be my goal. I think right now, just taking your nudge to meditate daily. Maybe I'll commit to 5 minutes a day. That's my takeaway from this conversation. And so maybe now we can talk a little bit about stress management for founders, right? You're a founder. You're also building this tool to help with stress management. What is your advice to new founders, maybe who are starting off and feeling kind of the stress of everything? And, this probably goes in waves, but what have you found to be helpful? And how does your tool maybe help founders as well?
Yeah, so my tool, the Aware, is really keeps me accountable. So whenever I see there are, I accumulate too many stress minutes throughout the day, and we can count it, right? We actually show up all the biometrics on the app. Even just that, it's a lot of self-awareness. Especially when you have meetings back to back, and then you look back at those things, right, and you say, wow, this is how much stress I accumulated throughout those meetings. Or the other way around is like, wow, just 5 minutes of meditation, this is what it did to me. This is what actually it's doing to my brain waves. Like being able to see what the meditation is doing to your actual biomarkers, and think of it like a heartbeat. Like people are very familiar with the heartbeat. I run, it goes really fast. I slow down, it goes very low. And the HRV, it's a measure of physiological stress. It's the other way around. So when you're running really a lot, the HRV tends to go down, but the ability to really measure it, it really gives you some indication about how you're doing. Likewise, I use the Apple Watch. One of the cool things that I like the Apple Watch is the zones. There are 5 zones, and I try to stay in zone 2, which is the burning zone. But I have this habit of doing everything too fast. I run fast. I tend to run fast. And so the Apple Watch really reminds me as I run, okay, slow down, go back to zone 2. And that's the fat burning zone. That's where you burn fat most efficiently. And the cool thing is that you don't even get tired that much. Like you're still exercising. It's actually a really sweet spot. And so is our mind. So what we're defining with Aware is these zones where too much stress is bad for you. Too little stress is not good for you. Again, like going to the gym, lift heavy weights. Too heavy weights, you're going to break your muscle. Too little weights, you're not going to build muscles. And the brain works the same way. So try to help you stay in that optimal zone. And then just looking at the history, it's a way to bring that self-awareness of, what meditation does to you, what a walk by the bay does to you, or what a stressful meeting did to you, what a bug that you're unable to fix. So just bringing that awareness. And just like you said before, it's like our brain is so good at self-adjusting to the point that it doesn't realize when we are actually stressed. So this is anchoring. This is a tool to anchor our mind, to just bring that awareness. This is what I do with our tool, with Aware, but more broadly, what I do as a founder. Like one of the things I'm learning to do is really like sort of following like that Zen approach. Whenever I feel anxiety or uncertainty for the future, just stick to the job. Keep doing day to day what I'm doing. Keep listening to the customers. I'm building something that can help them find purpose in every single day. When the mind starts spinning and says, oh, you're doing too slow on this part of the project, or you're not meeting your KPI, or that, become aware of it and then just keep doing the job, basically.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. One, the way you were describing your tool reminds me of like those like glucose trackers that are out, right? Like it tells you when your glucose has spiked, if you ate a certain food and when it's dropped. And, so it just gives you like very in the moment, like data. So that's what that reminded me of. And I think the zones of stress is really cool because I think that's probably very individual, just like the zone 2 exercise you mentioned. Like your zone 2 is probably very different from my zone 2, but the trackers can kind of see like, okay, this is your zone 2 versus Antonio's zone 2, right? So I think like understanding maybe some people experience stress for things that other people don't, and vice versa. So we can't really just say, oh, the same situation is going to stress out these two people the same way, right? So I think that individualistic feedback is really cool to have. And also your advice for founders, like sticking to the job, just keep moving forward one step at a time, because if you look at the big picture, it will feel like, wow, I'm not there yet. Like, how am I going to climb this huge mountain in front of me? And that can really slow you down, actually, right? Because you're spinning about that rather than just executing.
Yeah, totally. And the biomarker things, we are learning ourselves about all those functions a lot, like the heart rate, like women and men have different zones, but also individual have different zones. And the same thing is with brainwaves. And nowadays we launch our alpha, we're collecting much more data on many, many more people. And that's, we are learning ourselves, we keep refining the algorithm, but that's something that's very interesting. All the machine learning has to be customized and personalized to each individual users. And on the side of, keep doing their job, I get a lot of inspiration just by listening to interviews of Steph Curry, basketball players, Olympic athletes. Those are the people that inspires me the most as a founder. They all say pretty much the same thing, like when you are under a lot of pressure or winning a game or, just keep doing it. You're trained. If you put the work, you are trained. It happens all the time. Like for me, it would be like going to a public speaking. Sometimes I'm terrified of public speaking. Aware helps me bringing that awareness. But, just saying, yeah, you did your work and you know what you're doing, just show up. And that's the hardest thing. And those are the things that slow us down, is the nerves, the thoughts, the monkey brain that keeps spinning. But then if you go back to your day-to-day routine, which is building a product, listening to customers, selling this product and solving a real problem to your customers, then I think that's what helps me stay grounded. Remind myself why I'm doing this. Remind myself the mission, and then have the confidence that somehow you will figure it out a way to get where you want it. I have to say, in the last 2.5 years, it always showed up that way. There were so many moments where I said, what am I going to do now? This contractor didn't work. I waste so much time or whatever. And it always works out. If you, stand up again, we fall all the time. And I think one of the things that I'm learning more and more is to stand up faster. Instead of getting stuck into the train of thoughts, you really, really stand up faster and go back to your day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a coaching session today where we were talking about exactly this. We have all the data where we always figured it out. If you've made it this far, you figured it out up until now, right? And I think sometimes we forget that. All of us do. And I think it's a great reminder to founders or just anybody, right? Where, yeah, it may feel like, wow, I have no idea how I'm going to do this or that. I've never done this, but you can figure it out one step at a time. You just kind of find your next step. So breaking things down to say, okay, what's the next thing I can actually do? And just getting that started. And then that will open the path to the next thing you do and so on, right? But I think that's a great reminder to have for yourself and to keep getting back up and learning, just pausing and going, okay, that didn't work. What am I learning from that? So one question I had was, how did you define your customers? And sometimes this is the hardest to do in the beginning. Like, what is your ideal customer profile? What are some things that helped you to get clarity about that?
Yeah. So like I said, I come from a background that is a deep tech background. So I have very little experience with customers. And that's what the main thing I got out of Techstars. They use this framework, JTBD, jobs to be done. And it's a really, really nice framework because it really puts you in touch with the customer journey, with the pain of customer, the way you ask questions. It's incredible. You really connect emotionally with your customers. It's an incredible framework. It's really, really powerful. And so that was the first experience with customers. At the beginning, I was terrified. I said, what am I going to ask them? And then you get better and better at it. And so, yeah, just listening to their pain factor. We started interviewing Oura Ring users. So one of the things that I saw in Neurotech wearables is that most of them are have form factors that are really good for specific use cases. Like if you're doing meditation, you can wear a headband or a helmet. But if you want to take it outside, it has to be a different form factor. So the first set of customers interview that we did completely flipped the form factor of our products. And that's when we realized it has to be stylish, just like the Oura Ring. We learned it has to be stylish, functional, discreet. It needs to continuously track your brain in a discrete way. So the question was, how do I put something on my head and still be discreet? And so that came out of, that form factor came out of customers' interviews, basically. So it had to be on your head, be discreet. And that's how we come out first with the idea of the ear patch, and then later on with the idea of this ear cuff first, and now the ear patch, and is the alpha version of it. The next version was going to be much smaller. But the idea is that I wear it. Like, you probably didn't even realize I was wearing it.
Didn't. You just like pulled it out from behind your ear like a trick.
Yeah, exactly. Like a magician.
Yeah.
So that was the whole point, is to synthesize these very old technologies, 101 years old. That's how old the EEG is. So it's a very mature technology, even mature for consumer products. But what was missing, we realized it was the form factor, and they came out of the customer's interview. So that's the first thing I learned from those customers' interviews.
No, amazing. Because usually you just see like head covering kind of things, right? And that would definitely be hard to wear every day or even for like an hour. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that's the cool thing is we have, when you build something you can wear all the time. Now I have like 12 months worth of brain data on my phone. This is probably one of the biggest EEG data set ever built in history, because I continuously wear this 12, 14 hours a day, sometimes also at night. And so we are generating massive amount of brain data that, we correlate in all different ways. Right now we're measuring stress. So whether you're calm or alert, but in the future, all this data will be used for many other applications. Our long-term vision is really continuously monitoring the brain health throughout your life. And so hopefully someday we'll be able to shed light on other mental health conditions that today we don't know what causes them. But if we can collect massive amount of data throughout the day, throughout the months, throughout the years, or 500,000 people, 1 million people, and so forth, right? Just like Oura is doing. Now you can improve your algorithm, you can understand better how our brain functions. This is really taking this very old technology from a lab setting into everyday life. So I think it's going to have consequences also in the way we do research, brain research. In fact, we're working with a lot of centers, Stanford, UCSF. They love what we're doing. They love what we're doing because we're taking basically EEG into everyday life.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, is if you are working with like researchers or labs to kind of create these like maybe long-term studies to, see what is happening, right? Because I think most of the neuroscience probably studies are much more capped and time box to like, let's say 3 months or something at max. And it's probably not as continuous. So yeah, that's incredible. I think this is like probably every researcher's like dream to get hands on this data.
Look, for the data scientists, we have some exceptional data scientists in our team. And what they say is like, this is like heaven for us. For data scientists, having this much data is like heaven, literally. There's so much you can do with it, so much you can learn. And our goal is really to learn more and more about our brain. And yeah.
So you released the alpha. What are the next steps for your company, for the product? What's coming up?
Yeah, so with the alpha, we're basically improving the product. So we're refining, the hardware, when you bring this thing out in the wild to people that are complete strangers to you, that just click, your website and made a purchase, and you discover so many things about your products. And so that's what we've been doing, a work on refinement, both on the hardware, but also on the software, the user experience, like small things, like who would have thought that, like lots of people ask, can you show me the battery level? We had the battery level just hidden, like small things like this, tweaks like this to the user interface. And of course, the algorithms keep improving, and it's just like other wearables. The more data, the more people, get your device, the more refinement on the algorithms, the more personalization you can do on individual users. So the alpha is really being a lesson for us to keep improving the product, keep getting feedback, new interviews, by the way. And every stage of the company, interviews kind of change over time. Now it's more about features. How can we improve? What other features our customers want to see? So all these things. And after that, then next year, the goal is to focus more on growth. So after the alpha, we'll do a new release of the product. We improve features and ultimately miniaturizing it, make it more seamless, improve, the design. Yeah. So that's sort of the roadmap for the product.
Okay, amazing. I also were just thinking, because I know you were part of Techstars, like you mentioned, and Beta University. Just wanted to touch on how those accelerators helped you to basically, and I know you mentioned the form factor was one of the things that came out of Techstars, but anything else that really helped you through those programs, and why maybe founders should consider accelerators or when they should not?
Yeah, so I think first of all, also provide some funding in exchange for equity. So that's helpful, especially if you have a hardware company. You have inevitably some costs. If you have a software company, maybe you and your co-founder can develop the whole thing, the first MVP by yourself. But if you have a hardware company, then that's a little bit more challenging, because you need to at least pay the material, or if not, hire a couple of contractors to help you with the design. So there is the funding part, of course, with some accelerator have, some they don't. But things that I got out of Techstars is not just, not only the customers' interviews and understanding your customers, the sensitivity to your customers and product design. It's 360 degree. It's, financial model. Maybe some people, they don't see that important because, who can predict the future, right? But cool thing of that I learned in Techstars about the financial model is that it really gives you the tools, what they call levers, right? You start looking at your company in a much more scientific way. So I'll give you an example. Am I going to generate more revenue in software and hardware? Okay, let's try. Let's try what happened with this business model. Let's try with this other business model. And in real time, you see what the projections are. Now, are those projections going to reflect the reality in 5 years? Nobody knows, right? But at least you have control on it. And so if you update your financial model every month, now you can see what your projections were and what your actual KPIs are, and you start adjusting things. So you have so much more control on your company. That's one of another thing, really major lessons out of Techstars is the ability to, once you have those levers, now your anxiety level goes down, because if you don't have those levers, right, you don't know what to do, right? You have full control on those levers. Maybe sometimes you discover, I didn't realize there was this other lever. Great, let's add it to the financial model. That's another lever that we got. But once you have those levers, you have control on your company. And so I think that's the real value of financial models, more so than just randomly projecting some numbers, because investors want to see, a certain projection over 5 years. Is actually giving you a concrete idea of what the direction of your company is, and how, especially, what you need to do to adjust things in case you cannot meet those KPIs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the part you mentioned about simulation, so you can kind of adjust different, variables, levers, and that kind of projects out like, oh, this picture looks a little different if we focus on this versus this, right? So it kind of gives you a preview. Maybe in reality, it works, it doesn't, but at least you're going with some kind of information as opposed to no information.
It's exactly what you said. It's like a digital twin of your company. It's a simulation of your company. And so you can try to predict the future or keep adjusting your future based on the actual data you collect every month. And you keep adjusting direction, but at least you don't go blind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to wrap up our conversation, I wanted to ask, what are some resources or tools that have helped you along your journey, whether it was for education or building companies or leadership skills? What are some things that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, so I would say definitely mentors. Mentors are a big part of founder journey. Especially I'm a solo founder, by the way, and so having mentor, I'm so lucky and blessed to have a group of mentors who are phenomenal in all different areas. They're mentors who are neuroscientists, data scientists, people, founders of wearable companies, successful wearable companies, product designers, therapists, coaches. My mentors cover all parts of these financial advisors, and people with experience in fundraising, former founders with many successful exits. So I touch base with them constantly. Finding good mentors is essential to a company, to a founder journey. So I think that's definitely the first one. Yeah.
And how did you find your mentor? Because I think that's maybe sometimes a struggle for people to figure out, okay, how do I find a founder or a mentor if I don't know anyone in this area or in this industry or, how can people go about that?
Mentors are it's like dating, right? It's like a matchmaking. A mentor that works for me doesn't work for you. My company is different than yours. My product is different than yours. My personality is different than yours. My expertise is different than yours. So it's really hard to say you should go and talk to that person. It's the hardest thing to do to find good mentors, but it's not as hard as you would think. I'm doing mentorship myself too. It's the kind of karma kind of thing that, you got mentorship from people who are more experienced than you and you give back. That's a really cool thing of system, especially here in Silicon Valley, but more broadly here in the US is, so many people that are brilliant and had a successful exit or they went through a lot of great entrepreneurship experiences and they want to give back. And that's the beauty of finding mentors. And how you find them, like accelerators are great for mentorship. When you Techstars or other pre-accelerators, you get exposed to so many mentors on one-on-ones. Right now, I'm doing another accelerator. It's called CDL, Creative Destruction Lab, and lots of really great mentors, specifically on health and wellness. So that's really helping me a lot. So I think accelerators are the easiest way to get exposed to mentors, and then can be friends of friends. Like I talk to some of my investors and I say, hey, I think you should talk to this guy. And so it's just all our events, networking. And you find people that you resonate with. And then can I grab coffee? And then voila, they become your mentors. So there's all kind of ways to find mentors. But I would say Accelerator is probably the most obvious one.
Yeah, probably the accelerator is also focused on your specific industry or area. So you're going to meet more people that are maybe more relevant to what you need anyway.
Yeah, but also more broadly, I think, because as a founder, I don't need only people that understand about psychology and neuroscience. I need also people that understand about fundraising. I need that understand about the funding journey and the ups and downs, all kind of mentors. So that's a fun thing of being an entrepreneur is that you get exposed to so many things. You get to wear so many hats and you need to become an expert on all those, how to wear all those hats. So best way is through mentorship.
Yeah. Learn from others, right? But thank you for all of those different places that we can potentially find mentors. In San Francisco, there's so many events that are geared towards founders and so many incredible people show up to these different spaces. So you never know who you might end up meeting at a random event that you go to, so being open and just having a conversation can lead somewhere. Okay, so I had one more question. I wanted to ask you about TechCrunch, because I know we briefly talked about that before we started, and you won best in a certain category. So I just wanted you to talk about that experience and how you got that award.
Yeah, so TechCrunch, one of the things I didn't know is that TechCrunch is an accelerator on its own, because 2 months before, once you get selected to Battlefield 200, so actually they get applications from thousands of companies across the world, and then they select what they believe are the 200 best trends in different technologies, and have 6 different categories. So once you get selected, you actually go through this 8-week program. It's a very light program, but they give you a lot of really good master classes on all kind of topics, from how to talk to editors, or how to talk to investors, how to find investors, all kind of mentorships basically. And of course, they also coach you on the pitch itself. And so it definitely improved my pitch a lot during that process as well. They give you also, the cool thing, they give you a free boot. So everything is free. Once you get in a Battlefield 200, which for the early stage startup is fantastic, you get so many perks for free. Of course, the usual credits, Google Cloud and stuff like that. It's a great exposure. So you have this boot for 3 days, and you get exposure to a lot of people who either want to buy the product or want to invest in you, or just people curious about your technology. From any conversation, there's always something to learn, every person that stops at the booth. And then, of course, there's the exposure during your pitch itself. So I was into the health category, and I was blessed to win the best pitch for the health. So that gave me also on its own a lot of exposure. Got covered on the news, which means more PR. Again, lots of really perks. I encourage everyone to apply for TechCrunch. It's just a really, really great competition. But even just being there as one of the 200 companies being selected, it's a privilege, and it's an incredible opportunity for early stage founders.
Yeah, that is. And congratulations on not just getting into the Battlefield, but winning the award. That's amazing. Yeah. But anyways, I wanted to call that out because I know we talked about it. Is there anything you want to add that maybe we didn't have time to cover just yet?
So I guess, if this podcast is for founders, I would just say, don't give up. We're on the same boat. I'm a founder too. Just enjoy every single day of your journey. And keep in mind your mission, and just keep enjoying every single day of your journey. Keep building a great product. Keep making your customers happy. Keep delivering good quality products to address a real pain that your customers have. And with that, I think everything it's fixable and solvable. That's the thing I like. That's how I like to end this call, maybe.
Yes. No, that's a beautiful message. I think founders probably need to hear that message more often. So thank you so much, both for the message and taking the time to be here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dara. Appreciate it. Great meeting you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Little Pursuits podcast. Please follow, subscribe, and share this with one builder who needs it. Check out the show notes for links to connect with us and our guests.